Sometimes a single moment changes everything. A flash of a camera, a step across an invisible line, or a simple gesture of curiosity can transform an ordinary vacation into a story that millions will never forget. What happens when respect meets tradition, when human connection transcends protocol, and when breaking the rules leads to something beautiful instead of punishment? This is the story of Marcus Chun, a software engineer from California who thought he was just taking another tourist photo outside Buckingham Palace. He had no idea that his innocent mistake would create a moment so powerful it would be shared across every social media platform, featured on international news, and remind the world that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when we least expect them. In a world where royal protocol is sacred and guards are trained to remain motionless no matter what could possibly happen when someone accidentally crosses the line? The answer will restore your faith in human kindness and show you that some rules are meant to be broken in the most beautiful way possible. Marcus Chun had been planning this trip to London for 3 years. As a software engineer working 14-hour days in Silicon Valley, vacation time was precious and rare. He had saved every penny, researched every landmark, and created detailed itineraries that would make a travel agent proud. This wasn't just a vacation for Marcus. It was his first real break since starting his own tech company, and he wanted to make every moment count. The morning of July 15th started like any other tourist day in London. Marcus woke up in his small hotel room near Paddington Station, checked the weather forecast twice, and carefully packed his camera bag with extra batteries and memory cards. He had been a photography enthusiast since college, and London's historic architecture was like candy to his artistic soul. Big Ben, Tower Bridge, Westminster Abbey. He had shot them all with the precision of a professional photographer. But Buckingham Palace was different. This was the crown jewel of his London photography collection, the image he planned to print and frame for his apartment back home. Marcus had read about the best angles, the optimal lighting times, and even the guard-changing schedule. What he hadn't researched, however, were the specific rules about where tourists could and couldn't stand. The palace grounds were busier than usual that Tuesday morning. Summer brought waves of international visitors, and the area around the Victoria Memorial was packed with families taking selfies, tour groups following guides with colorful umbrellas, and street performers hoping to earn a few pounds from the constant stream of passersby. Marcus found himself caught in the middle of this organized chaos, camera in hand, searching for the perfect spot to capture the palace's magnificent facade. He noticed the royal guards immediately, of course. How could anyone miss them? Standing perfectly still in their iconic red tunics and tall black bearskin hats, they were like living statues positioned at strategic points around the palace. Marcus had read about their training, how they were taught to remain motionless regardless of what happened around them. Tourists could shout, wave, even try to make them laugh, but the guards would stand firm, eyes fixed straight ahead, representing centuries of British military tradition. Guard James Richardson had been standing at his post for 43 minutes. It was his second year of service with the Queen's Guard, and he had seen it all. Tourists who tried to take selfies with him, children who attempted to peek under his bearskin hat, and adults who made increasingly ridiculous faces trying to get him to crack a smile. Richardson had mastered the art of mental discipline required for the position. He could stand motionless for hours, his mind focused on his duty while his body remained perfectly still. Richardson came from a military family in Yorkshire. His grandfather had served in World War II. His father had been a career soldier, and James had always known he would follow in their footsteps. The Queen's Guard wasn't just a job for him. It was an honor, a continuation of family tradition, and a responsibility he took seriously. Every morning when he put on the famous red uniform, he reminded himself that he represented not just the monarchy, but centuries of British history and military excellence. Marcus positioned himself about 30 feet from Richardson's post, adjusting his camera settings for the morning light. The sun was hitting the palace at exactly the right angle, creating dramatic shadows and highlighting the intricate details of the architecture. Through his viewfinder, he could see the perfect shot forming. The palace's cream-colored facade gleamed in the sunlight. The royal standard fluttered gently in the morning breeze, and the guard stood like a sentinel protecting this symbol of British heritage. But there was a problem. A large tour group had positioned themselves directly in Marcus's line of sight, their guide explaining the history of the palace in rapid French while 20-something tourists snapped photos with their phones. Marcus waited patiently for them to move, but more groups kept arriving, creating an endless stream of people between him and his perfect shot. Frustrated but determined, Marcus began moving closer to the palace, looking for an angle that would avoid the crowds. He was so focused on his camera's viewfinder that he didn't notice the subtle changes in the pavement beneath his feet, the way the tourist crowds seemed to stop at an invisible line, or the small signs posted at regular intervals around the palace perimeter. Marcus stepped across the boundary rope without realizing it existed. The rope was low, barely knee-high, and painted the same color as the pavement posts that supported it. In Marcus's defense, it wasn't immediately obvious where tourists were supposed to stop, and restricted areas began. He had been following other photographers who seemed to know exactly where to position themselves. But, in the crowded confusion of the morning rush, he had lost track of the unofficial photography boundaries that experienced London tourists seemed to understand instinctively. Richardson noticed the breach immediately. His peripheral vision, trained through months of guard duty, caught the movement of someone entering the restricted perimeter. This was the moment every guard was trained for, the moment when protocol demanded action. According to regulations, Richardson should have immediately called for backup, reported the security breach, and followed established procedures for dealing with unauthorized personnel in restricted areas. But something made Richardson pause. Through his disciplined military focus, he observed Marcus more carefully. This wasn't a security threat or a political protester. This wasn't someone trying to make a statement or cause a scene. This was clearly a tourist, completely absorbed in taking photographs, obviously unaware that he had crossed into a restricted area. Marcus's body language showed no aggression, no intent to cause trouble. He was simply a photography enthusiast looking for the perfect shot. Marcus finally looked up from his camera viewfinder and found himself face-to-face with Richardson, less than 10 feet away. The realization hit him like a cold wave. He was standing somewhere he definitely wasn't supposed to be. The guard's tall bearskin hat made him appear even more imposing, and his perfectly pressed red uniform represented an authority that Marcus had accidentally challenged. For a moment, neither man moved. Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he realized his mistake. He had read stories about tourists being arrested, fined, or banned from royal properties for violating security protocols. His mind raced through possible consequences. Would this ruin his vacation? Would he be deported? Would this incident follow him back to his business in California? Richardson faced his own moment of decision. The rule book was clear about unauthorized personnel in restricted areas, but his human judgment told him this was different. He could see the genuine shock and embarrassment in Marcus's eyes, the way the tourist immediately stepped backward, the camera hanging around his neck like evidence of his innocent intentions. What happened next would change both of their lives in ways neither man could have predicted. Instead of following strict protocol, Richardson made a choice that would soon be witnessed by millions of people around the world. But, in that frozen moment, with Marcus realizing his mistake and Richardson weighing his options, neither man knew that someone in the crowd was already recording everything on their smartphone. The morning sun continued to shine on Buckingham Palace. Tourists continued their chatter and photography, and somewhere in the crowd, a video was being captured that would soon spread across social media like wildfire. But, for now, it was just two men, a tourist who had made an innocent mistake and a guard who had to decide what kind of man he really was when the rules met real human connection. The silence between Marcus and Richardson stretched for what felt like hours, but lasted only seconds. Marcus could feel sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool London morning air. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his camera, uncertain whether he should speak, apologize, or simply retreat as quickly as possible. Every story he had ever heard about royal protocol and security breaches flooded his mind simultaneously. Richardson stood perfectly still, but behind his disciplined exterior, his mind was working rapidly. He could hear his sergeant's voice from training, drilling the importance of maintaining security perimeters, following protocol without exception, and never allowing personal feelings to interfere with duty. But he could also hear his grandfather's stories about the war, about moments when humanity mattered more than regulations, about times when doing the right thing meant thinking beyond the rule book. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "I'm so sorry," he said, taking another step backward. "I didn't realize I had crossed a line. I was just trying to get a good photograph of the palace." His American accent seemed to echo louder than intended in the morning air, drawing attention from nearby tourists who were beginning to notice the unusual interaction between a guard and a visitor. The crowd around them had started to shift and grow. Other tourists sensed that something interesting was happening and began moving closer, phones appearing in hands as people prepared to document whatever might unfold. A group of teenagers from Spain pointed and whispered to each other in rapid Spanish. A family from Japan had stopped mid-conversation to stare at the scene developing before them. Among the growing audience was Sarah Mitchell, a journalism student from Edinburgh who was in London for a summer internship with a digital media company. Sarah had been photographing street scenes around the palace for a project about tourism and cultural heritage when she noticed the unusual standoff between the guard and the American tourist. Her instincts told her this could become something worth documenting, so she discreetly positioned herself where she could record what happened next. Richardson could sense the growing attention from the crowd, and he knew that whatever decision he made would likely be witnessed and possibly recorded by dozens of people. In the age of social media, even small incidents could become major news stories within hours. He thought about his commanding officers, about his family's military reputation, about the weight of tradition and duty that his uniform represented. But he also thought about his younger sister Emma, who had special needs and had always been fascinated by acts of kindness from strangers. Richardson remembered how much it meant to his family when people showed patience and understanding toward Emma instead of judgment or frustration. He thought about the kind of world he wanted to help create, not just through military service, but through small moments of human decency. Marcus continued to back away slowly, his face flushed with embarrassment and worry. "Should I wait here for someone to escort me back?" he asked quietly. "I really don't want to cause any more trouble. This is my first time in London, and I obviously don't understand all the rules yet." His voice carried a genuine distress that seemed to cut through the formal atmosphere surrounding the palace grounds. The American tourist's obvious sincerity and distress triggered something in Richardson's memory. He remembered his own first days of guard training, how overwhelming it had been to learn all the protocols and procedures, how easy it was to make mistakes when everything was new and unfamiliar. He remembered the kindness of a senior guard who had helped him through those early difficulties instead of simply reporting his errors. Richardson made his decision. Instead of calling for backup or following the standard procedure for security breaches, he took a small step forward and spoke quietly, just loud enough for Marcus to hear, but not loud enough to attract more attention from the crowd. "Sir," Richardson said in a calm, professional voice, "you've crossed into a restricted area, but I can see this was unintentional. If you'll step back behind the rope barrier, we can resolve this without any formal reporting." His tone was firm but kind, the voice of someone who understood the difference between malicious rule-breaking and innocent mistakes. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you so much," he said, carefully moving back toward the tourist area. "I really appreciate your understanding. I was just so focused on getting the shot that I didn't pay attention to where I was walking." But Richardson wasn't finished. As Marcus moved back toward the proper tourist area, the guard made another decision that would prove even more significant. Instead of returning to his rigid stance and pretending the interaction had never happened, Richardson took a few steps forward, positioning himself closer to the rope barrier where he could speak with Marcus more easily. "You mentioned you were trying to get a good photograph," Richardson said, his voice still quiet but carrying a warmth that surprised both Marcus and the growing crowd of observers. "If you position yourself about 10 feet to your left and angle your camera slightly upward, you'll get a much better view of the palace facade with better natural lighting." Marcus was stunned. Not only was this royal guard not arresting him or calling for backup, but he was actually giving him photography advice. "You know about photography?" Marcus asked, his surprise evident in his voice. Richardson allowed himself a small smile, barely visible but genuine. "My younger sister is quite the photographer. She's taught me a few things about angles and lighting over the years. She'd be jealous that I'm standing this close to such a beautiful building every day and not appreciating the artistic opportunities." The crowd around them had grown larger, and Sarah Mitchell continued recording, realizing she was witnessing something special. Other tourists had their phones out, some taking photos, others recording videos. The interaction between the stern-looking guard and the nervous American tourist was unlike anything most of them had ever seen at Buckingham Palace. Marcus moved to the position Richardson had suggested and raised his camera to check the view. The guard was absolutely right. From this angle, the lighting was perfect, the architectural details were clearly visible, and the composition was far superior to anything he could have achieved from his previous position. "This is incredible," Marcus said, genuinely excited. "You have a really good eye for this." "Take your time getting the shot right," Richardson said. I'll make sure no one walks into your frame. And, with that, the guard moved slightly to position himself where he could gently redirect foot traffic away from Marcus's photography area. What happened next would be the moment that transformed this from a simple tourist story into something that would touch hearts around the world. As Marcus prepared to take his photographs, Richardson noticed something that made him make yet another decision that would defy all expectations. Marcus was wearing a small pin on his jacket lapel, a pin that Richardson recognized immediately. It was a support ribbon for autism awareness, the same type of pin that Richardson's family wore to support his sister Emma. Without thinking about protocol or propriety, Richardson pointed to the pin and asked, "Is that for someone special?" Marcus looked down at his jacket, surprised that the guard had noticed such a small detail. "My nephew," he said quietly. "He's 8 years old and has autism. I wear this to remind myself to be patient and kind, because the world isn't always easy for kids like him." Richardson's entire demeanor shifted. The formal military bearing remained, but something warmer and more personal entered his voice. "My sister Emma is 17 and has autism. She's the strongest person I know, and she's taught our whole family about seeing the world differently." The crowd around them had gone quiet, sensing that something profound was happening between these two strangers. Sarah Mitchell continued recording, tears forming in her eyes as she realized she was documenting something beautiful and unexpected. "Emma loves photography too," Richardson continued. "She sees details that most people miss, finds beauty in places others overlook. She'd love to meet someone who takes pictures professionally." "I'm not really a professional," Marcus said modestly. "I just love capturing moments and places that matter. But I'd be honored to meet your sister if that were ever possible." Richardson made his most significant decision yet. "Emma visits me here sometimes when I'm off duty. If you're going to be in London for a few more days, perhaps we could arrange that meeting. I think you two would have a lot to talk about." The crowd around them erupted in spontaneous applause. Complete strangers were wiping away tears, and the sound of dozens of phones capturing photos and videos filled the air. What had started as a potential security incident had transformed into a moment of human connection that transcended nationality, protocol, and social barriers. Sarah Mitchell knew she had just recorded something special, something that would remind people around the world about the power of kindness and understanding. As she watched Marcus and Richardson exchange contact information while maintaining the guard's professional dignity, she realized that sometimes the most powerful stories happen in the most unexpected places. Sarah Mitchell's hands were still shaking slightly as she uploaded the video to her social media accounts that evening. She had spent the entire day thinking about what she had witnessed, replaying the interaction between Marcus and Richardson in her mind. As a journalism student, she understood the power of storytelling, but she had never expected to stumble upon something so genuinely moving during a routine photography assignment. She wrote a simple caption: "Sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when humanity trumps protocol." Today at Buckingham Palace, a tourist accidentally crossed into a restricted area while trying to take a photograph. Instead of following standard security procedures, this royal guard chose kindness and connection. When they discovered they both had family members with autism, something magical happened. This is what the world needs more of. Sarah had about 300 followers on her social media accounts, mostly friends from university and family members. She expected maybe a dozen likes and a few comments from people she knew. What she didn't expect was what happened over the next 48 hours. The video began spreading immediately. Within the first hour, it had been shared 50 times. By morning, it had reached 10,000 views. Sarah's phone started buzzing constantly with notifications as the video gained momentum across multiple platforms. Friends were tagging friends, family members were sharing it with their networks, and complete strangers were adding their own comments about similar experiences with kindness from unexpected sources. Marcus had no idea any of this was happening. He had spent the rest of that Tuesday exploring London, visiting the Tate Modern, walking along the Thames, and editing the beautiful photographs he had taken at Buckingham Palace with Richardson's help. The images were stunning, exactly the kind of professional quality shots he had hoped to capture during his trip. But, more than that, they would always remind him of an unexpected moment of human connection in a foreign country. That evening, Marcus called his sister Lisa in California to tell her about his day. Lisa's son Tommy was the nephew Marcus had mentioned to Richardson, and she was always interested in hearing about people who showed understanding and support for autism awareness. "You're not going to believe what happened today," Marcus told her, describing the entire interaction with Richardson. This guard not only didn't arrest me for accidentally breaking a rule, but he gave me photography advice and wants to introduce me to his sister, who also loves taking pictures. It was like finding a friend in the most unexpected place. Lisa was moved by the story. Tommy would love to hear about this, she said. He's always worried about making mistakes in public, about accidentally doing something wrong and getting in trouble. This story shows him that good people exist everywhere, and that most mistakes can be fixed with honesty and kindness. Meanwhile, Richardson had finished his guard duty and returned to his small flat in South London, where he lived with his parents and sister Emma while serving with the Queen's Guard. Emma was waiting for him in the living room, working on a photography project for her art therapy class. She looked up when he entered, immediately noticing that something was different about his usual post-duty demeanor. "You look happy today," Emma observed with the direct honesty that was characteristic of her communication style. "Did something good happen at work?" Richardson sat down next to his sister and told her about meeting Marcus. Emma's eyes lit up as he described the American tourist photography equipment and his patience in trying to get the perfect shot of the palace. "He wears a pin for his nephew who has autism," Richardson told her. "And he said he'd like to meet you if possible. I thought maybe when I have a day off, we could visit some of the photography locations around London that you've been wanting to explore." Emma clapped her hands together, a gesture she made when she was particularly excited about something. "Could we really do that? I have so many questions about his camera and what settings he uses for architectural photography. And I want to show him my pictures of the Thames bridges at different times of day." Their mother, Margaret Richardson, had been listening from the kitchen and came into the living room wiping her hands on a tea towel. She was accustomed to James following protocol strictly during his guard duty, so this story of him bending rules and making personal connections with tourists surprised her. "That was very kind of you, James," she said. "But are you certain this won't cause problems with your superiors? I know how seriously the military takes protocol violations." Richardson had been thinking about this same concern all afternoon. Technically, he should have reported the security breach through official channels, regardless of how minor it seemed. But his commanding officer, Sergeant Williams, had always emphasized that the Queen's Guard existed to protect and serve, and that sometimes protection meant understanding the difference between real threats and innocent mistakes. "I think Sergeant Williams would approve," Richardson said. "He's always telling us that we represent the best of British values, and I can't think of anything more British than helping a confused tourist while showing consideration for family." By Wednesday morning, Sarah Mitchell's video had exploded across the internet. Major news outlets had picked up the story, and Sarah found herself fielding interview requests from television programs, newspapers, and online media companies. The video had been viewed over 500,000 times and shared more than 50,000 times across various platforms. The comments section had become a collection of heartwarming stories from people around the world. Parents of children with disabilities shared their own experiences of unexpected kindness from strangers. Military families wrote about the humanity they saw behind their loved ones' uniforms. Tourists posted their own stories of getting help from local people when they found themselves confused in foreign countries. One comment that particularly stood out came from a teacher in Australia. "I'm showing this video to my students today. This is what empathy looks like in action." Two strangers found common ground and chose connection over conflict. This is the kind of world we should be building for our children. Marcus woke up Wednesday morning to dozens of text messages and missed calls from friends and family members back in California. Confused, he checked his email to find messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years, all asking if he was the American tourist in the viral video from London. Viral video? Marcus had no idea what anyone was talking about. He quickly searched online and found Sarah's video, which had been reposted and shared across numerous platforms. Watching himself interact with Richardson from a third-person perspective was surreal. He could see what the crowd had seen, a moment of genuine human connection that transcended cultural and professional boundaries. The video showed everything: his initial confusion and embarrassment, Richardson's patient and kind response, their conversation about photography and family, and the crowd's emotional reaction to their unexpected friendship. But what struck Marcus most was seeing how their small interaction had affected everyone around them. He could see strangers wiping away tears, people putting down their phones to actually watch instead of just record, and the general atmosphere shifting from tourist spectacle to something more meaningful. Marcus's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his business partner David calling from their office in San Francisco. "Marcus, You need to see the news coverage of your London adventure, David said excitedly. This story is everywhere. CNN picked it up, it's trending on social media, and people are calling it exactly the kind of positive news the world needs right now. Marcus felt overwhelmed. I was just trying to take a photograph, he said. I never intended for any of this to become public. But that's exactly why it's so powerful, David replied. This wasn't staged or planned. It was just two decent people being kind to each other, and somehow that's become a symbol of hope for millions of people. As Marcus processed this information, he realized that his simple mistake had created something much larger than he had ever imagined. The video wasn't really about him or Richardson individually. It was about the possibility of human connection in an often divided world. Later that day, Marcus received a message through social media from Richardson. The guard had found Marcus's contact information through the viral video coverage and wanted to reach out directly. Hello, Marcus, the message read. I hope you're enjoying the rest of your time in London. I wanted you to know that Emma and I have been following the response to our meeting, and we're both amazed at how positively people have reacted. Emma would still very much like to meet you if you have time before you return to America. She has many questions about photography, and she's prepared a small portfolio of her London pictures to show you. Would Friday afternoon work for you? We could meet at St. James's Park, which has some excellent photography opportunities and is close to the palace. Marcus immediately responded with enthusiasm. He had planned to spend Friday visiting museums, but the opportunity to meet Emma and continue the friendship that had accidentally begun seemed far more meaningful than any scheduled tourist activity. What neither Marcus nor Richardson realized was that their Friday meeting was also being anticipated by thousands of people around the world who had been following their story online. Sarah Mitchell had posted an update about the planned meeting, and people from dozens of countries were expressing their hope that the new friendship would continue to develop. The viral video had touched something deep in people's hearts, a reminder that kindness still existed, that understanding was possible between strangers, and that sometimes the most meaningful connections happened in the most unexpected circumstances. Friday afternoon arrived with typical London weather, a mixture of sunshine and threatening clouds that seemed to change every few minutes. Marcus arrived at St. James's Park 30 minutes early, carrying his camera equipment and feeling more nervous than he had expected. This wasn't just a casual meeting anymore. It felt like the continuation of something that had touched people around the world. Richardson and Emma arrived precisely on time, a trait that Marcus was beginning to recognize as characteristic of military families. Emma carried a carefully organized portfolio of her photography work and a small notebook filled with questions she had prepared about camera techniques and composition theory. Emma Richardson was 17 years old, with bright eyes that seemed to notice details that most people missed. She wore a simple blue dress and carried her camera equipment in a well-organized bag that showed her serious approach to her photography hobby. When she met Marcus, she extended her hand for a formal handshake and made direct eye contact, speaking with the clear, honest communication style that Marcus recognized from his nephew Tommy. Hello, Marcus, Emma said. I'm very pleased to meet you. James has told me about your photography equipment and your technique for architectural shots. I have many questions, but I understand that conversations should be balanced, so I've also prepared some of my own work to share with you. Marcus was immediately charmed by Emma's directness and preparation. I'm honored to meet you, Emma, he replied. Your brother told me you're an excellent photographer, and I'm excited to see your work and learn from your perspective. Richardson watched the interaction between Marcus and his sister with quiet satisfaction. Emma had been anxious about the meeting all week, worried about making a good impression and asking the right questions. But Marcus's genuine interest and respectful approach immediately put her at ease. James suggested we start our photography walk at the lake, Emma said, consulting her notebook. The lighting should be optimal for water reflection shots at this time of day, and there are several architectural elements that create interesting composition opportunities. As they walked toward the lake, Marcus was impressed by Emma's technical knowledge and artistic eye. She pointed out details he hadn't noticed, the way afternoon light created patterns on the water, how the placement of benches and pathways led the eye through the natural composition of the park landscape, and the optimal angles for capturing both the natural and architectural elements of the space. You have a really sophisticated understanding of photography principles, Marcus told her as she demonstrated different shooting angles around the lake. Have you had formal training, or is this something you've developed on your own? Emma smiled, clearly pleased by the compliment. I take art therapy classes, and my instructor, Miss Davidson, has been teaching me about visual composition and lighting. But mostly I learn by practicing every day and studying photographs that I admire online. James helps me understand different perspectives because he sees the same locations from his guard posts, so he can tell me about how light changes throughout the day. Richardson had been walking slightly behind them, allowing Marcus and Emma to focus on their photography discussion while remaining close enough to participate when appropriate. He was struck by how naturally Marcus adapted his communication style to Emma's preferences, speaking clearly and directly, giving her time to process information, and showing genuine interest in her technical explanations. Emma has been documenting architectural details around London for over a year, Richardson told Marcus. She's particularly interested in how historical buildings incorporate both functional and decorative elements. Emma opened her portfolio and began showing Marcus her work. The photographs were remarkably sophisticated, showing not just technical skill but genuine artistic vision. She had captured details of London architecture that most tourists never noticed: intricate carved stonework, patterns created by window arrangements, and the interplay between historical and modern building elements. "These are incredible," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "You have an eye for finding beauty in details that most people would walk right past. This shot of the Westminster Bridge decorations is particularly striking. The way you've captured the texture and patterns shows real artistic maturity." Emma beamed at the praise. "That photograph took me 47 attempts to get right," she said. "I wanted to capture how the Victorian ironwork creates geometric patterns that change depending on the viewing angle." James was very patient with me that day. As they continued walking and taking photographs together, Marcus began to understand why Richardson had been so moved by their initial conversation about family and autism. Emma's way of seeing the world was indeed different, but it was a difference that revealed beauty and details that others missed. Her patience, precision, and dedication to her craft were inspiring. "Marcus," Emma said as they paused near a particularly beautiful view of Buckingham Palace in the distance, "I have a question about your nephew Tommy. James told me he also has autism. Does he enjoy photography, or does he prefer other kinds of art?" Marcus appreciated Emma's direct approach to asking about Tommy. "Tommy is more interested in music than visual art," he explained. "He has perfect pitch and can identify any musical note just by hearing it. But, like you, he notices details that other people miss. He hears layers in music that most of us don't even realize are there." "That's fascinating," Emma replied. "I think people with autism often have enhanced perception in their areas of interest. For me, it's visual details and patterns. For your nephew, it's auditory patterns. We probably both experience the world more intensely than neurotypical people do." Richardson was amazed by the easy rapport that had developed between Marcus and Emma. His sister was often cautious around new people, needing time to become comfortable with strangers. But Marcus's genuine interest in her work and his respectful communication style had quickly put her at ease. "Would you like to see the view from the Blue Bridge?" Emma asked. "It's one of my favorite photography locations in the park. The angle provides an excellent perspective of both the lake and the palace grounds." As they walked toward the bridge, Marcus noticed that other people in the park seemed to recognize them. Several tourists had their phones out and appeared to be taking pictures or videos from a distance. Word had apparently spread through social media about the planned meeting between the American tourist and the Royal Guard's sister. "Are you comfortable with all this attention?" Marcus asked Richardson quietly. "I never expected our simple conversation to become such a public story." Richardson considered the question carefully. "Initially, I was concerned about potential professional consequences," he admitted. "But my commanding officer told me yesterday that the positive response to our interaction reflects well on the Queen's Guard and demonstrates the values that we're supposed to represent. He said that showing kindness while maintaining professionalism is exactly what the Guard should be doing." Emma had been listening to their conversation while setting up her camera for a bridge shot. "The attention has been mostly positive," she observed. "Many people have written comments about their own family members with disabilities, and several photographers have shared their work with me online. It's created opportunities for connections I wouldn't have had otherwise." As the afternoon progressed, Marcus, Richardson, and Emma settled into an easy friendship. They moved through the park together, taking photographs, discussing technique, and sharing stories about their families and interests. Emma showed Marcus her systematic approach to documenting architectural details, while Marcus shared professional tips about lighting and composition that could enhance her already impressive work. "Marcus," Emma said as they paused for a rest on a park bench, I have a proposal. I'm working on a photography project about human connections in urban spaces. Would you be willing to be part of it? I'd like to document how strangers can become friends through shared interests, and your meeting with James seems like a perfect example. Marcus was touched by the invitation. I'd be honored to be part of your project, Emma. What would you need me to do? Emma consulted her notebook again. A habit that Marcus was learning helped her organize her thoughts and plans. I'd like to photograph you and James together at several locations around London that represent different types of architecture and social spaces. The photographs would show how friendship can develop across cultural and professional boundaries. Richardson nodded approvingly. That sounds like a meaningful project, Emma. And it would give us a good excuse to continue spending time together while Marcus is still in London. As the sun began to set over St. James's Park, the three new friends made plans for the following day. Emma wanted to photograph Marcus and Richardson at several iconic London locations, creating a visual story about their unexpected friendship. Marcus was scheduled to fly back to California on Monday, but he found himself wishing he could extend his stay to continue developing these new relationships. Before we part today, Marcus said, I want to thank both of you for making my London trip so much more meaningful than I ever expected. Emma, your passion for photography is inspiring. And James, your kindness turned what could have been an embarrassing incident into something beautiful. Emma smiled and shook Marcus's hand again with the same formal politeness she had shown when they first met. Thank you for treating me like a serious photographer and for sharing your knowledge so generously. Tomorrow will be an excellent day for our project. Richardson watched his sister's obvious happiness and felt grateful for the chance encounter that had brought Marcus into their lives. Tomorrow we'll show you some London locations that most tourists never see, he promised. Emma knows hidden architectural treasures throughout the city. As they prepared to part ways, none of them realized that their Friday afternoon in St. James's Park had been discreetly documented by Sarah Mitchell, who had been following their story since the original viral video. She had captured images of their photography collaboration, their easy conversation, and the genuine friendship that had developed between them. That evening, Sarah posted a follow-up to her original viral video, showing highlights from Marcus and Emma's photography session. The response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive, with people around the world expressing their joy at seeing the friendship continue to develop and grow. Saturday morning brought perfect London weather for photography, clear skies with dramatic clouds that created constantly changing light conditions. Marcus met Richardson and Emma at Westminster Station, where Emma had planned an ambitious itinerary of architectural photography locations that would showcase London's historical and cultural diversity. Emma had prepared a detailed schedule in her notebook, complete with optimal timing for lighting conditions at each location and specific photographic objectives for Marcus's final day in London. Her organizational skills and attention to detail impressed Marcus even more than her artistic talent. Our first location is the Millennium Bridge, Emma announced as they emerged from the underground. The angle provides excellent opportunities for capturing both St. Paul's Cathedral and the Thames, and the pedestrian traffic creates interesting human elements for urban photography. As they walked toward the bridge, Marcus noticed that their presence was attracting attention from other tourists and locals. Several people approached them throughout the morning, expressing appreciation for the positive story that had emerged from their chance meeting. Many shared their own experiences of unexpected kindness from strangers or family connections to autism awareness. Your story has given people hope, explained Maria Santos, a teacher from Spain who stopped them near the bridge. My students have been discussing your video in class, talking about how small acts of kindness can make big differences. You've started important conversations about empathy and understanding. Richardson found these interactions both gratifying and humbling. His simple decision to show patience and kindness to a confused tourist had somehow resonated with people around the world, reminding them of the possibility for human connection in an often divided society. Emma was documenting their day together as part of her photography project about human connections. She captured Marcus and Richardson working together to photograph the bridge's architectural details, their easy conversation about technique and composition, and the natural friendship that had developed between them. The relationship between photographer and subject is always collaborative, Emma observed as she directed Marcus and Richardson for a particular shot. But friendship photography is different because everyone is simultaneously photographer and subject. We're all creating the story together. Their second stop was the Tower Bridge, where Emma wanted to explore the contrast between Victorian engineering and modern London development. Marcus was impressed by her sophisticated understanding of architectural history and her ability to translate that knowledge into compelling visual compositions. Emma, have you considered studying photography formally at university? Marcus asked as they climbed to an elevated viewpoint that Emma had identified for optimal bridge photography. Your technical skills and artistic vision are already at a professional level. Emma considered this question carefully, a habit Marcus had learned to appreciate over their 2 days of friendship. I'm interested in studying both photography and architectural history, she replied. Miss Davidson thinks I might enjoy a program that combines visual arts with cultural documentation. But I want to make sure any program I choose will accommodate my learning style and support my development as an artist. Richardson had been quietly proud of his sister's growing confidence throughout their time with Marcus. Emma often struggled with self-doubt about her abilities, partly due to negative experiences with people who didn't understand her communication style or intense focus on her interests. But Marcus's genuine respect for her work and professional approach to their photography collaborations had clearly boosted her artistic confidence. Marcus, Richardson said as they paused for lunch near the Tower of London, Emma has never shown her photography to someone outside our family before this week. Your encouragement means more to her than you probably realize. Marcus felt deeply moved by this information. Emma's work is genuinely exceptional, he said. Any encouragement I can offer is nothing compared to what she's taught me about seeing details and finding beauty in unexpected places. After lunch, they visited Covent Garden, where Emma wanted to document street performance and public art as examples of how creative expression brings communities together. The market area was busy with tourists and locals, street musicians and artists, creating the kind of dynamic urban environment that Emma loved to photograph. As they were setting up for photographs in the market area, they were approached by a young man carrying professional video equipment. He introduced himself as David Chun, a documentary filmmaker who had been following the story of their friendship since Sarah Mitchell's original viral video. I'm working on a short documentary about how social media can amplify positive human stories, David explained. Would you be willing to participate in an interview about how your chance meeting has affected your lives and the response you've received from people around the world? Marcus, Richardson, and Emma looked at each other uncertainly. The attention their story had received had been largely positive, but the idea of a formal documentary felt like a significant step beyond the casual social media coverage they had experienced. What would be the purpose of the documentary? Richardson asked, and how would it be distributed? David Chun explained that he was producing the film for a digital platform focused on positive news stories and human interest content. The goal was to explore how spontaneous acts of kindness could create ripple effects of positivity in communities and across social media networks. Your story represents something people are hungry for, David explained. In a time when news cycles focus heavily on conflict and division, your interaction demonstrates that understanding and friendship are still possible between strangers from different backgrounds. Emma raised an important question. Would the documentary include information about autism awareness and how families support relatives with disabilities? That seems like an important part of our story that hasn't been emphasized enough in the social media coverage. David nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. The human interest angle is important, but the deeper message about empathy, family support, and understanding differences is what makes this story meaningful rather than just heartwarming. After discussing the proposal, they agreed to participate in brief interviews that David would conduct in St. James's Park, returning to the location where their friendship had deepened the day before. Emma was particularly interested in using the documentary as an opportunity to showcase the work of young artists with disabilities and to encourage other families dealing with similar situations. During the interview process, Marcus reflected on how profoundly his simple photography mistake had changed his perspective on travel, human connection, and the power of small acts of kindness. I came to London to take pictures of buildings, he told David's camera. But I'm leaving with friendships that I know will continue long after I return to California. Richardson spoke about the military values of service and protection and how those values sometimes meant choosing human compassion over rigid rule following. The Queen's Guard exists to serve the people, he explained. Sometimes that service means recognizing when someone needs help rather than punishment. Emma's interview focused on her photography project and her observations about how people with autism experience and contribute to the world differently. Everyone sees and processes information in their own way, she said. My autism affects how I perceive visual details, but it also helps me create art that might not exist otherwise. Marcus understood that immediately, and that understanding made our friendship possible. As the documentary interview concluded, Marcus realized that his last evening in London was approaching rapidly. He had originally planned to spend his final day shopping for souvenirs and revisiting his favorite tourist locations. Instead, he had spent it creating art with new friends and reflecting on the unexpected directions that travel and life could take. Emma, Marcus said as they prepared to part ways, I want to stay in touch and see how your photography project develops. And I'd love to introduce you to my nephew Tommy through video calls. I think you two would enjoy comparing notes about how you each experience the world. Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. I would very much enjoy meeting Tommy, she said. And I'll send you updates about my architectural photography series. Perhaps someday you can return to London and we can explore more locations together. Richardson shook Marcus's hand with genuine warmth. Thank you for turning what could have been an awkward professional situation into something meaningful, he said. You've given Emma confidence in her artistic abilities and reminded me why I'm proud to represent the values of service and kindness in my work. As Marcus returned to his hotel that evening to prepare for his flight the following morning, he reflected on the unexpected trajectory his London vacation had taken. He had come seeking photographs of famous buildings and landmarks. Instead, he had discovered that the most beautiful experiences often came from human connections and shared understanding. The viral video of his interaction with Richardson continued to spread across social media platforms, generating hundreds of thousands of views and comments from people around the world. But for Marcus, the real value of the experience wasn't the public attention. It was the genuine friendships he had formed and the reminder that kindness and empathy could transcend cultural, professional, and social boundaries. Over the following months, Marcus maintained regular contact with Richardson and Emma through video calls and social media. He shared Emma's photography work with his network in California, helping her gain recognition for her architectural documentation project. Emma, in turn, introduced Marcus to Tommy through video calls, creating a connection between two young people who shared both artistic interests and the experience of navigating the world with autism. The documentary about their story was released 6 months later, featuring not only their original interaction, but also the ongoing friendship that had developed from that chance meeting. The film emphasized themes of understanding, acceptance, and the power of small acts of kindness to create lasting positive change. Sarah Mitchell, whose original video had started the entire phenomenon, was invited to screen the documentary at journalism conferences as an example of how social media could amplify positive human stories rather than just controversy and conflict. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the least visible one. Marcus's story with Richardson and Emma inspired countless other small acts of kindness and understanding. People shared stories of helping confused tourists in their own cities, of showing patience with family members who had disabilities, and of choosing empathy over judgment in everyday interactions. In the end, Marcus's simple mistake while photographing Buckingham Palace had created something far more valuable than any tourist photograph could have been. It had reminded the world that human connection and understanding were still possible, that kindness was still powerful, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories began with someone accidentally crossing a line and finding friendship on the other side.